All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Humanist Wicca.
Okay.
And specifically, a group called the Sacred Meadow Circle tradition.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I thought this would be something that would be interesting to our listeners because, you hear about Wicca.
Right.
This is a very specific tradition
Yeah.
that really kind of takes a unique approach to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So first of all, just to kind of set the stage, they have this structure
Yeah.
that's really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
They have these 3 tiers,
Okay.
and I was kind of picturing it as a triangle,
Okay.
with a broad base, and then it kind of comes up to a point.
Uh-huh.
So at the very bottom, at that brain base, they have what they call
Right.
the Astral Sacred Meadow Circle.
Okay.
So this is like the most accessible level for anybody
Got it.
who is interested in witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
And they specifically say you don't have to identify as Wiccan
Okay.
to join this.
Just stay.
It's all online.
So it's like an introductory level for people to kind of
Yeah, just kind of dip your toes in the water.
dip their toes in, get a feel for what it's all about.
Exactly.
Nice.
And then,
yeah.
so we move up the triangle a little bit. We get to the full moon Sacred Meadow Circle. And this is an in-person group.
Okay.
And this is, for folks who really want to take a step further.
Okay.
And they focus a lot on like empowerment
Gotcha.
and
Yeah.
self-initiation.
Okay.
So now we're getting a little more serious.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the very top of that triangle
Mm-hmm.
is what they call the New Moon Sacred Meadow Circle.
Okay.
And this is the governing priesthood.
Okay.
And these are Seax Wiccans
Mm-hmm.
who have been initiated into the tradition.
Interesting.
So there's still like a leadership
Mhm. Yeah.
structure there.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I find so fascinating about them is that
Yeah.
they don't really believe in like that kind of power dynamic.
Okay.
Where you have people at the top who are considered
Oh.
higher or more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like a service type.
Oh,
thing.
yeah, like a guiding
Yeah.
mentorship.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting.
That is interesting because you don't see that very often
Right.
in groups that have that kind of a tiered structure.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like, from kind of reading about them, that
Mhm.
personal growth is a really important part of
Copy.
what they're all about.
Interesting.
So it's not just about following rules or,
right. Or dogma.
dogma. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that tie into Humanist Wicca?
Right.
What exactly makes Humanist Wicca different?
Okay, so that's a really great question. So when you think about traditional Wicca, there's often this belief in deities or a higher power.
Right.
But what sets Humanist Wicca apart is they really take this grounded approach.
Okay,
They
cool.
focus on the inherent value of nature and humanity. And they view deities as symbolic representations rather than literal beings.
So like as an example,
Yeah.
would they say like the Greek goddess Demeter
Right.
exists?
Yeah. So they might look at a goddess like Demeter and say, okay, she represents the cycle of nature,
Okay.
the nurturing power of the earth.
So more of a concept then.
Exactly. A metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's less about
Mhm.
supernatural beings and more about understanding ourselves and our place.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about understanding ourselves, our connection to the natural world.
Okay, so how does that translate into
Yeah.
like actual practice?
Mm.
What kind of things do they do?
Yeah, well, like many Wiccan traditions, they draw upon several key principles, and one of the most central ones is attuning themselves to the rhythms of nature.
Okay.
So they pay close attention to the phases of the moon,
Mhm.
the changing seasons, the cycles of life and death.
So they see themselves as a part of that
Exactly.
rather than
As opposed to separate from,
Yeah.
And this directly connects to their emphasis on ecological balance.
Okay.
They believe we have a responsibility to care for the environment
Right.
and to live in harmony with nature.
I think that's something a lot of people
Okay.
can
You're absolutely-
relate to.
Yeah.
These days. It's a very
It's a growing concern for many.
yeah. So they don't believe in like a supernatural deity in the traditional sense,
Right.
but they do acknowledge
They do
I don't know.
they do acknowledge a power greater than the ordinary,
Okay.
a force that connects all things.
Okay.
They view this power as a natural potential that
Yeah.
exists within everyone and everything.
Okay. So it's more about tapping into that
Yeah.
universal energy
Yeah.
rather than
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a great way to put it.
So they do incorporate like traditional
So you do.
Wiccan elements into their practice.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
So, they will often use tools in their rituals, such as wands, staffs, cauldrons, altars.
Okay.
And they have specific rites for different purposes.
Okay.
For example, they have a rite called erecting the temple,
Okay.
which they do at the beginning of each gathering.
What does that involve?
So basically, they're creating a sacred space
Okay.
using visualization and invocations. And it's really symbolic of their intention to connect with the divine within and around them.
Okay.
So it's a way of setting the stage for their rituals,
Right.
focusing their energy.
So we talk about self-initiation.
Yeah.
But do they have like formal initiation ceremonies if
Yeah.
somebody wants to move up to like a different...
Yeah, they have initiation ceremonies for those who choose to move from one circle to the next.
Okay.
But they approach it with this focus on individual guidance and development.
Right.
They believe in supporting members as they find their own path within the craft rather than imposing a rigid set of
Rules.
rules or beliefs. Yeah,
Right. So it's influenced by Seax Wicca,
it is.
which has its roots in
Anglo-Saxon traditions.
Anglo-Saxon traditions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that influence?
Oh, okay. Well, so their deep connection to nature and their focus on individual development are both strongly influenced by Seax Wicca.
Okay.
They've taken inspiration from this tradition and adapted it to create something truly unique.
Right.
And this is where their three-tiered structure comes into play.
Okay.
The New Moon Sacred Meadow Circle, their governing priesthood, consists of initiated Seax Wiccans
Okay.
who help guide and support the other members on their individual journeys.
So they've taken these ancient traditions
Right,
and,
yeah.
and made them relevant to
To the modern world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
So we've covered a lot of ground already, but I'm really eager to dive deeper
Yes,
into
you too.
some of their specific beliefs and practices.
Yeah. Let's get into it. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that I find really interesting about them is how they view light and darkness.
Okay.
In a lot of spiritual tradition, there's this idea that you need to attain some kind of pure, light-filled state.
Right.
And anything that's dark or negative is something to be avoided or feared.
Yeah.
The Sacred Meadow Circle actually embraces those darker aspects of life.
Oh.
They see it as an opportunity for growth.
So it's not about denying those difficult
Exactly.
emotions or experiences.
It's about acknowledging them and integrating them into your whole self.
Yeah, it's interesting because they also don't seem to put a lot of emphasis on the afterlife.
That's true.
Like a lot of other spiritual traditions are really focused on...
Heaven or reincarnation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're challenging that.
They are. They believe in finding fulfillment and meaning in the present moment rather than focusing on...
What might come later.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it's more about like really being present.
Yeah, living fully in the here and now.
And that seems to tie in with their emphasis on connecting with nature.
Absolutely.
As a way to really...
Yeah, it's a way to ground themselves in the present moment.
Right.
To appreciate the beauty and the wonder of the natural world.
Yeah.
They incorporate practices like walking barefoot.
Okay.
Connecting with trees.
Interesting.
Studying the local ecology.
So they're getting back to...
Exactly. They're reclaiming that ancient bond between humans and nature.
Which I think a lot of us have kind of lost.
Yeah, in our modern technology-driven world.
Right.
Yeah, it's easy to get disconnected from those natural rhythms.
And it's not just about individual connection.
Right.
It's also about community.
Absolutely.
And so they see community as kind of an extension of that.
Yeah, they see community as an extension of nature, as a vital source of support and shared experience.
Right. And that really kind of fits in with their whole thing about personal growth.
Yes. And ethical living.
Ethical living. Yeah.
It's not just about individual enlightenment.
Right.
It's about creating a better world for everyone.
So, we talked about how they view deities
a
little differently than some other Wiccan traditions.
Yeah.
So, can you just remind us again?
Sure. So, in many Wiccan traditions, deities are seen as literal beings.
Okay.
But the Sacred Meadow Circle, they view deities as archetypes.
Okay.
Or symbolic representations of different aspects of human nature.
So it's more about looking inward and trying to understand.
Exactly. It's about looking inward,
Yeah.
seeking to understand and integrate the different facets of our own being.
So if they don't believe in like a traditional hierarchy,
Right.
How do they have this governing priesthood?
That's a great question.
Like, how does that work?
Well, the key is that they view leadership as a form of service.
Okay.
Not a position of power. So even those in the Newman Sacred Meadow Circle, which is their priesthood, they are not considered higher or more powerful than other members.
So experience and knowledge are still valued.
Absolutely. But it's not...
But not in a way that...
In a way that creates like a
rigid power dynamic.
Right. So we've talked about their S.B.A.Ts, which are their regular kind of...
Coven meetings.
Coven meetings, yeah. What about their approach to the Sabbats?
Okay, so the Sabbats are those special festivals that mark the turning points of the year.
Right.
And they honor the 8 Sabbats, or the wheel of the year, as it's often called.
Okay.
But they often weave in their own unique humanist perspective.
So give us an example.
Okay, so for example, their celebration of Yule, which usually falls around the winter solstice, focuses not just on the rebirth of the sun, but also on acts of community service.
And they're taking that ancient festival and connecting it to their values. They're connecting it to their values in a very real and practical way.
Right. Yeah. That's cool.
It is.
So for people who are drawn to the idea of an afterlife, how would they address that?
Well, they would acknowledge that it's a natural human longing to seek meaning and purpose beyond the finite nature of our physical lives.
Right.
They don't dismiss that need.
Okay.
But instead, they encourage individuals to find that sense of transcendence in their connection to nature, to community, and to the unfolding of life's mysteries in the present moment.
So it's about finding the sacred in the everyday rather than looking for it somewhere else.
It's a beautiful way to put it.
And that ties into their understanding of the Wiccan rede.
Absolutely.
And it harm none.
Do what you will.
Right.
And they take that very seriously, extending it beyond just personal actions to encompass their impact on the community and the environment.
So it's not just about like your individual actions.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that our actions have consequences that ripple outwards.
I really like that.
Yeah.
This has been such a fascinating...
It has. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. I'm so impressed by their approach to, you know, blending ancient wisdom with this modern humanist
perspective.
Yeah,
it's really inspiring.
You know, it's really cool how they've managed to create this, you know, really vibrant spiritual practice.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
Yeah.
It really is.
So I think before we wrap up,
it
would be helpful to just kind of recap some of the key takeaways for our listeners.
Absolutely.
So first of all, this is a humanist Wiccan tradition.
Yes.
So they honor the earth. They celebrate
human connection.
Right? Yeah. And they view deities not as literal beings.
Right. They see them as representations of powerful forces within ourselves. Right.
In the natural world.
Right.
Yeah.
And that really kind of goes right into their emphasis on personal growth, ethical living.
Absolutely.
And that connection.
Yeah. That deep connection to nature.
Yeah.
It's all about encouraging each member to walk their own unique path.
Right.
Yeah.
And they've developed this 3-tiered structure that provides different levels of engagement.
Right. You can dip your toes in with the online Astral Circle.
Right.
Or you can go deeper with the in-person full moon and new moon groups.
But even though they have this structure, it's not about hierarchy.
It's not.
They reject the idea of a rigid power dynamic, and they see leadership as a form of service.
Exactly. It's a very egalitarian approach.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about how they view light and darkness.
Yeah, that's a really interesting aspect of their tradition.
It is.
You know, they don't shy away from the shadow side of life.
Right. They don't see it as something to be.
They see it as essential for growth and understanding, feared or avoided.
Exactly.
Yeah. And instead of focusing on the afterlife.
Right.
They choose to.
They choose to find fulfillment in the present moment.
Find fulfillment.
Embracing the beauty and the mystery of life as it unfolds.
Yeah. That's really kind of the thing that I keep coming back to.
Me too.
You know, it's like that.
It's about living fully in the here and now.
Yeah.
Finding the sacred in the everyday.
Yeah.
Making a positive impact on the world around them.
It's a perspective we can all learn from.
Absolutely.
So before we say goodbye, we always like to leave our listeners with a question.
A little something to ponder.
Yeah. So if you think of deities as metaphors for aspects of ourselves, which deity resonates most strongly with you?
Ooh.
and why.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it could be a figure from any pantheon or even just a quality or concept that has a special meaning for you.
It's an invitation to explore your own inner landscape and to connect with the archetypes that shape your understanding of the world and your place within it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Sacred Meadow Circle.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Me too.
We hope you found it enlightening.
Yes.
And until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep growing.